So y'all can record this, you cannot record it, but the biggest thing I want everybody to hear me say right now, it's about fucking time.
Yeah. What happens when a basketball legend speaks her mind at a major Nike event? Well, let's just say things got heated real fast. Sheryl Swoopes, the Hall of Famer, and one of the most influential women's basketball players of all time, just dropped some serious comments at a Nike event. And it didn't take long for fans to start calling a full-blown race narrative.
This moment today is not just about Asia Wilson. This moment today is not just about what Sheryl Swoopes did. This moment is so much bigger than the two of us.
But here's the real kicker. Some say it was a direct shot at Caitlin Clark. Was this just an empowering moment for women's basketball, or did Swoopes cross the line?
Talking to John a few minutes ago, and I said back in 1997, when I got my first signature shoe, Nike didn't even have a women's sports marketing department. And look where we are today.
Sheryl Swoopes, one of the greatest basketball players to ever step on the court, just made headlines again, but not for what you might think. This time it wasn't about her legendary skills or championships, or her undeniable influence on the game. No, this time it was about something much bigger, something much deeper, something that instantly divided fans.
This moment right now for me fills my heart, it fills my soul, it fills my spirit. And I'm so grateful and I'm so thankful that Nike finally got it. They got it in 97 because they did something that no one else dared to do. They've always been the brand, the company that thinks outside of the box. And I always say somebody had to be the first. And I was blessed enough and lucky enough that I got to be the first.
Went down at a Nike event where Asia Wilson was being celebrated in a big way. Now, if you follow women's basketball, you already know Asia Wilson is one of the most dominant forces in the game today. She's got rings, MVP titles, Olympic gold, and now her very own signature shoe with Nike. This is huge in the world of basketball. Getting a signature shoe means you reach an elite level of status few ever achieved so naturally. Nike was going to go all out for this moment. Enter Sheryl Swoopes now. For those who don't know, Swoopes was the first woman ever signed in Nike basketball. She was the first woman to have her own signature shoe. She paved the way for every WNBA star who came after her. So her presence at this event wasn't just fitting, it was symbolic. She represented the past, the foundation of women's basketball, while Asia Wilson represented the present and future. And at first, everything seemed fine, but then she took a turn that had some fans cheering and others shaking their heads.
And here we are, almost 30 years later, to have another Black woman to have her own signature shoe. I'm not looking at you right now. That's big. And it's not just for all the Black girls out there, it's for every little girl out there that dares to dream.
Because instead of keeping the focus on Asia's moment on the shoe, on what this means for women's basketball, Swoopes decided to make about something else entirely. Race. Now look, no one is saying race isn't a factor. In sport, it absolutely is. And historically, Black athletes have had to fight harder for recognition, endorsements, and opportunities. That's a fact. But the way Swoopes framed it, the way she emphasized that this moment was big, because another Black woman was getting a shoe rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Some fans felt like she was diminishing Asia Wilson's accomplishment by making it seem like the only reason this moment was historic was because of her race, not because of her talent or hard work or her dominance on the court. Others felt like it was an unnecessary shot at Caitlin Clark, who was in the face of Nike's marketing efforts lately. Let's be real here, Caitlin Clark is a generational talent. She's breaking records, drawing massive viewership, and bringing a level of attention to women's basketball that hasn't been seen in a long time. She's box office. So it makes perfect sense why Nike would invest in her. But that investment, that attention, has sparked a lot of conversations about race in women's basketball. Some believe Caitlin Clark is getting more opportunities simply because she's white, that her popularity is being pushed harder than players like Angel Reese Wilson or even legends like Candace Parker. And that's where this whole situation gets messy. Because Swoopes' comments at the Nike event felt like they were feeding into that narrative, that this was about righting a wrong about making sure black athletes got their shine in a space that had supposedly been dominated by someone else. And let's not forget this isn't the first time this conversation has come up. When Caitlin Clark was lighting up the college scene, drawing millions of viewers to Iowa games, some people weren't happy, they felt like. Angel Reese, who led LSU to a national championship, wasn't getting the same recognition. Despite being just as dominant in her own way, it's been a constant debate who gets more media love, who gets bigger endorsements, who gets more respect. And at the core of it, race always seems to find its way into the conversation. But here's the thing, shouldn't athletes be recognized for what they bring to the game, not just the color of their skin? That's the part of Swoopes' speech that made a lot of people uncomfortable, because instead of letting A'ja Wilson's accomplishment stand on its own, she framed it in a way that made it seem like it was more about race than basketball. Now, let's be fair here, Swoopes wasn't necessarily wrong. Black women in sports have had to fight for respect and recognition. That's undeniable. The WNBA itself has struggled with marketing its stars properly, often failing to give their best players the kind of push they deserve. But does that mean every major achievement has to be tied to race? That's what fans were debating. After Swoopes' speech, some were all for it. They believed she was simply speaking the truth, highlighting the reality that black women still don't get the same opportunities. In sports, they saw it as her standing up for black excellence, making sure the moment wasn't ignored or downplayed. But others saw it differently. They felt like it was unnecessary that it turned a positive moment into something divisive, that it took away from A'ja Wilson's individual greatness and turned it into a race issue when it didn't need to be. And then, of course, the Caitlin Clark comparison started flying. Because, let's be real, this whole thing wouldn't be as controversial if Caitlin Clark wasn't Nike's golden girl. Right now, Clark wasn't getting commercials, massive media coverage, and a level of attention that some feel is disproportionate compared to her WNBA counterparts. This probably wouldn't have been such a big deal, but because Clark is at the center of so much of Nike's marketing push, because she's the face of women's basketball for so many fans, Swoopes' words hit differently. Was she taking a shot at Nike for backing Clark? So heavily was she implying that Clark's success was undeserved? Was she suggesting that A'ja Wilson's moment was more important simply because of race? That's what had fans split. And look, this isn't the first time something like this has happened in sports conversations about race representation, and fairness happened all the time, and they should dare. Important, but there's a time and place for them. And for a lot of people, a Nike event celebrating A'ja Wilson's shoe wasn't the right time or place. They wanted to celebrate A'ja for her talent, her hard work, her dominance, not because she's a black woman, but because she's a damn good basketball player who earned this moment. And that's where frustration came from, because instead of letting that moment be about the game, it became about something else. And that's why the situation blew up the way it did now. Where does Caitlin Clark fit into all of this? Well, like it or not, she's part of the equation, simply because of how much attention she's getting. Her rise in popularity has reignited old debates about race in women's sports. Some believe her success comes at the expense of black athletes who have been just as good, if not better. Others argue that Clark's impact on the game is undeniable and that she deserves every bit of recognition she's getting. But no matter which side of the argument you fall on, one thing is clear: Sheryl Swoopes' comments added fuel to the fire. And now the conversation is bigger than ever. Is Nike handling things the right way? Are black athletes still being overlooked? Is Caitlin Clark's success truly just about her talent? Or is there more to it? These are the questions that people are asking, and they aren't going away anytime soon. Now, this is just one side of the story. There's still a whole other layer to this, including the reactions from players, fans, and media members. That's where things get even more heated, even more controversial. So buckle up, because this conversation isn't over yet. The conversation surrounding Sheryl Swoopes' comments at the Nike event didn't just stop at that moment. It exploded across social media, news outlets, and sports discussions everywhere. The moment the clip started circulating, reactions poured in, and let me tell you, it was anything but quiet. Some people backed Swoopes 100%, saying she was simply voicing a reality that's been ignored for far too long. They argued that the history of black women in sports has always been a battle for recognition, and that moments like A'ja Wilson getting her own signature shoe shouldn't just be celebrated. They should be acknowledged as victories in a much larger fight for equality. For these supporters, Swoopes wasn't taking anything away from Wilson. She was adding context. She was reminding people that this wasn't just about a sneaker. It was about breaking barriers, about how black women in sports have always had to work twice as hard for half the recognition to them. This wasn't about diminishing Caitlin Clark or Nike's decision to back her. It was about making sure history was understood in the right way, but not everyone saw it that way. The backlash was swift, and it wasn't just coming from the usual corners of social media. Even some WNBA fans, ones who have supported women's basketball for years, felt like Swoopes went too far. They argued that by making the moment about race, she had overshadowed what should have been A'ja Wilson's night. Some pointed out that this is the same issue that has been dragging women's basketball down for years: the constant division, the constant need to pit players against each other based on things that should have nothing to do with basketball. They questioned why Swoopes couldn't have just celebrated Wilson without turning it into a racial discussion. And then, of course, there was inevitable debate about Caitlin Clark. Let's not sugarcoat it. Clark's rise has rubbed some people the wrong way. Some see her as the poster child of privilege, a white player receiving unprecedented attention, while black players who have been just as dominant haven't gotten nearly the same level of marketing. Others say Clark's popularity isn't about race, it's about the fact that she's a walking highlight reel player who brings excitement, energy, and record-breaking performances to every game she plays. The divide has never been more obvious. Clark supporters argue that she's simply earning what she's been given. They point to her numbers, her ability to fill arenas, her impact on TV ratings, and the undeniable fact that she's drawing more eyes to women's basketball than almost anyone before her. They say that brands like Nike are simply doing what any smart business would do, investing in the player who moves the needle the most. But the other side of the argument is just as passionate. They argue that marketing is never just about talent. It's about narratives, about storytelling, about shaping the way fans view the game. And in their eyes, Clark's rise has been manufactured in a way that black players haven't been given. They believe there's a system in place that elevates white athletes more than their black counterparts, and that no matter how dominant someone like A'ja Wilson is, she'll never get the same level of investment simply because of the way the sports industry operates. And that's exactly why Swoopes' words had such an impact for many. She wasn't just speaking about Wilson's moment, she was speaking to the larger frustrations that have been boiling under the surface for years. But here's where things get complicated, because while race is undoubtedly a factor in sports, the reality is also that the WNBA has struggled to market its stars effectively for years. It's not just about race, it's about a league that has yet to figure out how to truly capitalize on the talent. Just think about it. How many WNBA stars have actually been given the full marketing push that a player like Clark is getting right now? Even players like Candace Parker, Diana Taurasi, or Sue Bird, legends in their own right, never got the kind of crossover mainstream appeal that Clark seems to have. Is that because of race? Maybe, but it's also because the WNBA for the longest time has struggled with how to sell itself to the wider sports audience. And that's the irony in all of this, because while Swoopes was calling out Nike for not doing enough in the past, Nike is arguably doing more now than they ever have before. They're putting money behind women's basketball in a way that was unheard of just a few years ago. They're creating signature shoes, pushing major commercials, making investments that can help grow the game. But the problem, the moment they chose to push Caitlin Clark as the face of it, the entire discussion got wrapped in controversy. And that's not Clark's fault. She didn't ask to be the center of this. She didn't ask for people to compare her to Angel Reese or A'ja Wilson or anyone else. She's just playing basketball. She's doing what she's always done, lighting up the court, setting records, and proving she's one of the best to ever do it. But in the world of sports, things are never that simple. Because even if Clark herself isn't pushing a racial narrative, the people around her are. The way she's covered, the way she's promoted, the way she's talked about it, all plays into the larger debate about fairness and representation. And that's why Swoopes' words hit as hard as they did, because even if you agree with her, even if you believe she was just speaking her truth, there's no denying that what she said added fuel to a fire that was already burning. And that brings us to the big question: where does this all go from here? Does Nike adjust its strategy? Do they try to balance the way they market Clark and other players? Do they attempt to smooth things over by giving even more backing to Wilson and other black athletes in the league? Or does this moment just add more division to a sport that desperately needs unity? Because if there's one thing that's clear in all of this, is that the WNBA doesn't need more reasons for fans to pick sides. It needs to grow. It needs to bring in more fans. It needs to turn moments like this into opportunities to elevate the entire league, not just one or two players. But the conversation keeps centering around who's getting more attention, who's being pushed more, and who's being left behind. And we might just keep spinning in circles, and that's the biggest tragedy of all. Because at the end of the day, these women are all ballers. They've all put in the work. They all deserve recognition. Caitlin Clark is special. Asia Wilson is special. Angel Reese is special. And they should all be celebrated for what they bring to game. But instead of lifting each other up, this moment has turned into yet another debate, another argument, another controversy that takes away from what really matters. And that's the game. So now the ball is in. Nike's court, the ball is in the WNBA's court, the ball is in the fans' court. What happens next, only time will tell. So what do you think with Sheryl Swoopes just celebrating Asia Wilson's big moment? Or did she cross the line by turning it into a race issue? And what about Nike? Are they playing favorites or just marketing to different audiences? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because we need to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive like this. Until next time, keep it real, keep it fair, and keep the conversation going. Peace.